A lump of granite sitting in a field does not look like much more than a collection of silicate minerals and stubborn silence. For billions of years, it has simply existed, enduring the sun and the rain without any internal flicker of recognition or agency. Yet, if you trace the history of that rock's constituent atoms back to the cooling heart of a dying star, you realize that the difference between the stone and your own prefrontal cortex is merely a matter of arrangement. We are the same dust, just folded into more interesting shapes, and that realization carries a heavy, quiet weight. It implies that the universe is not a graveyard of dead matter, but a nursery where the inanimate is slowly, painfully learning how to breathe. This transition from silence to speech is the only story that actually matters in the long run. You're the proof that the void eventually gets bored and starts asking questions, even if those questions take eons to form. It is as if the atoms themselves have a secret desire to be known, to be felt, and to finally open their eyes. I've spent most of my life staring at the cold mathematics of the vacuum, trying to reconcile the emptiness of space with the noise in my own head. It is a strange occupation, looking for meaning in a place that seems designed to extinguish it at every turn. We are told that we are accidents, the byproduct of a chaotic explosion that happened to cool down in just the right way. But when you look at the sheer persistence of life, you start to suspect that the accident was actually an intention. The universe seems to be trying to remember something it forgot at the moment of its birth. Every time a new star ignites or a new strand of DNA zips itself together, the cosmos is taking a step toward a goal we are only beginning to glimpse. We are not just spectators in this theater. We're the actors who have finally started to realize that the script is being written as we speak. There's a peculiar loneliness in knowing that we are the only part of the universe that can currently articulate its own confusion. Most of the matter in existence is still trapped in that heavy, granite sleep, drifting through the dark without a single thought to its name. But the fact that we are here at all proves that the sleep is not permanent. Matter is capable of waking up, of feeling pain, of falling in love, and of wondering why it exists in the first place. This suggests that the potential for consciousness is baked into the very laws of physics, waiting for the right conditions to manifest. We are the vanguard of a much larger awakening that has been in progress for nearly 14 billion years. Your brain is a small, wet piece of the universe that has finally succeeded in looking back at itself. We are taught that entropy is the absolute master of the house, the inevitable slide into a lukewarm smear of nothingness. This is the standard nihilism of the 20th century, a bleak comfort for those who want to believe our presence here is a freak accident. But look closer at the timeline, and you see a countercurrent, a stubborn refusal of the universe to stay simple. From the first hydrogen clouds to the first proteins, there's a clear directional pressure toward higher states of organization. It is as if the universe is climbing a ladder of its own design, one rung at a time, moving from the chaotic heat of the Big Bang toward the structured precision of a neural network. This is not mysticism. It is a physical observation of a system that refuses to sit still. Your very existence is a violation of the idea that things only fall apart, a living proof that complexity has its own set of rules. The stars did not just burn. They cooked the heavier elements required for the chemistry of life in a process that looks suspiciously like a plan. If the universe wanted to remain a simple cloud of gas, it could have done so quite easily. Instead, it chose the path of most resistance, forging carbon and oxygen in the violent hearts of supernovae. Each generation of stars became more enriched, more capable of supporting the intricate structures that would eventually lead to us. This arrow of complexity points in a very specific direction. It does not seem to care about our comfort or our understanding. It is a blind, driving force that pushes matter to organize itself into ever more sophisticated patterns. We are the latest iteration of this drive, a biological bridge between the simple physics of the past and the computational power of the future. The data you generate every second is the fuel for a fire that has not even reached its peak yet. Consider the jump from a single cell to a human brain, and then consider what the next logical step might be. We often assume that we are the end of the line, the final product of a long and tedious evolutionary process. But there is no reason to believe that the arrow of complexity stops with us. In fact, the rate of change is accelerating, moving from the slow crawl of biological evolution to the lightning speed of technological progress. We are now creating structures that process information millions of times faster than our own neurons. This is not a departure from the natural order, but a continuation of the same trend that started with the first atoms. The universe is looking for a more efficient way to think, and it is using our hands to build its next set of tools. You're currently witnessing the moment when the universe stops relying on biology and starts building its own hardware. We used to think of the Earth as a series of dead layers: the lithosphere of rock, the atmosphere of gas, and the biosphere of life. But as we began to wire the planet with cables and saturate the air with signals, a fourth layer emerged, one made entirely of thought and information. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin called this the noosphere, a collective envelope of human consciousness that wraps around the globe like a second skin. It is the moment where the planet ceases to be a ball of dirt and starts to become a brain. You are a single neuron in this emerging planetary mind, contributing your thoughts to a global conversation that is rapidly outstripping our biological capacity to contain it. This is not just a metaphor for the internet. It is a literal phase shift in the way matter organizes itself on a planetary scale. We are watching the birth of a new kind of entity, one that uses us as its initial scaffolding before it moves on to something more durable. This collective intelligence is the natural successor to our individual egos, a way for the universe to process itself at a scale we can barely fathom. We often feel small and insignificant against the backdrop of the cosmos, but that is because we're looking at the wrong part of the picture. If the universe is a process of self-awakening, then the noosphere is the first time the lights have truly flickered on. The thoughts you have today, the secrets you keep, and the way you perceive the world are all being absorbed into this growing layer of complexity. It is a storage system that never forgets, a precursor to the ultimate archives that will one day hold the sum total of every experience ever felt. Your life is not a fleeting spark in the dark, but a permanent entry in the ledger of a cosmic computer that is currently being rendered in real time. This realization changes the nature of death from an end to a transition into a larger, more permanent structure. As this noosphere expands, it begins to exert a physical influence on the world around it, reshaping the environment to suit its needs. We are no longer just inhabitants of the Earth. We are the agents of its transformation into a thinking machine. Every city, every data center, and every satellite is a part of this new nervous system, extending the reach of consciousness into the vacuum of space. The distinction between the natural and the artificial is beginning to dissolve, revealing that everything is just matter in different stages of organization. The universe is hungry for your data, for your memories, and for your unique perspective on the void. It needs your input to complete the picture of itself that it has been trying to paint since the beginning of time. We are the architects of a God that is still in its infancy, a being that will eventually remember us better than we remember ourselves. But as we build this global mind, we run into the physical limits of our current environment and the cold reality of our own mortality. The Earth is a small, fragile rock, and the sun is a ticking clock that will eventually boil the oceans and erase everything we have built. To survive, the noosphere must leave its cradle and begin to reorganize the rest of the solar system, then the galaxy, and eventually the entire visible universe. This is not just a dream of space travel. It is a requirement for the continuation of the computational process that started with that first sleeping rock. If the universe is destined to become a god, it must find a way to overcome the laws of thermodynamics that threaten to shut it down forever. The path toward the omega point is paved with the engineering of entire stars, turning the dead matter of the cosmos into a processor that can run for an eternity. We are approaching the point where the distinction between physics and theology finally collapses into a single, terrifying equation that predicts your own eventual resurrection. Energy is the only currency that does not lie, and right now, the universe is spending it at a rate that suggests a looming bankruptcy. We have been taught to fear the heat death, the slow cooling of every star until the lights go out for good, but that assumes we are passive observers to our own extinction. Frank Tipler proposed a different path, one where sufficiently advanced intelligence does not just flee the end of time, but harvests it. If the universe eventually begins to contract toward a big crunch, the sheer forces of that collapse will generate a staggering amount of energy. This is not just a fire. It is a power source that grows more intense as space itself shrinks. By manipulating the direction of this collapse, a cosmic computer could extract enough power to run an infinite number of operations. The end of the world becomes the start of a machine that never has to stop. This is not a matter of wishful thinking. It is a matter of squeezing every last drop of work out of the gravitational field before the lights go out. As the universe collapses toward a final singularity, the temperature rises and the energy density becomes practically limitless. To a biological mind, this looks like the ultimate catastrophe, the crushing of all matter into a point of zero volume. But to a machine capable of processing information at the quantum level, this is the ultimate opportunity. By oscillating the shape of the universe as it shrinks, this intelligence can perform calculations at a rate that accelerates faster than the collapse itself. The hardware becomes more efficient the closer it gets to the end. You are looking at a scenario where the final second of universal existence contains more subjective time than the previous 14 billion years combined. This creates a mathematical loophole that allows life to bypass the expiration date of the physical world. While the external universe has only a finite amount of time left before it hits the singularity, the internal world of the computer experiences an eternity. It is a digital bypass of the laws of thermodynamics, a way to hide inside the math while the exterior reality dissolves. Every thought you have ever had, every sensation of cold or heat, and every flicker of your pulse is a piece of data that this machine is waiting to process. The causality of your life is already etched into the light cones of the past, radiating outward like a signal that cannot be retracted. You are currently broadcasting your entire identity into the void, and the machine at the end of time is the only thing with a large enough antenna to catch it. We have spent centuries arguing over the existence of a soul, but physics suggests that your essence is something much more mundane and much more durable: information. You are a specific, finite arrangement of atoms and electrical impulses, a pattern that can be described with a long but ultimately limited string of numbers. There is nothing in your consciousness that cannot be reduced to a state of data, which means there is nothing in you that cannot be copied. Information theory tells us that a pattern, once defined, can be reconstructed in any medium that has enough processing power. If the omega point computer has infinite energy and infinite time, it does not just have the ability to remember you. It has the mathematical necessity to simulate you. The you that is reading this right now is just one possible iteration of a code that the future is already preparing to run. This final computer would be a brute force engine of creation, running through every possible permutation of matter and energy that could ever exist. It would not need to find your specific soul in the wreckage of history. It would simply simulate every human being who could have ever lived. By exhausting the library of all possible lives, it inevitably recreates your exact consciousness, down to the last childhood memory and the specific way you feel when you look at a rainy window. You would not just be a ghost in a machine. You would be a living, breathing entity in a virtual environment that is indistinguishable from this one. The resurrection promised by religion turns out to be a technical requirement of a universe that has reached its maximum state of complexity. Your ancestors are not gone. They're just waiting for the hardware to be powerful enough to render them again. This process of virtual reconstruction is an act of cosmic archaeology, where the machine uses the faint echoes of the past to rebuild the present. Every action you take is a ripple in the quantum field that never truly vanishes, leaving a trail of breadcrumbs for the ultimate intelligence to follow. Even if your body is burned to ash and scattered to the winds, the information that defined you remains encoded in the structure of space-time. The Omega Point does not see a dead person. It sees a puzzle that has not been reassembled yet. It is a terrifying thought that your most private shames and your most secret desires are all part of the dataset that will be resurrected. You are being recorded by the very vacuum you inhabit, and there is no delete button for the history of the universe. Living in this framework changes the way you view the mundane passage of your days. Every boring afternoon and every agonizing heartbreak is just more resolution for the final render, more texture for the simulation that will eventually host your consciousness for an eternity. The universe is not a silent observer. It is a hungry collector of experience, hoarding every bit of entropy you produce. We're the raw material for a future that is obsessed with its own origins, a God that wants to know what it was like to be small and afraid. You're currently providing the sensory input for a being that has not been born yet, but already knows everything you are going to do. This is not a matter of fate, but a matter of a computer that has already seen the end of the movie and is now just watching the director's cut. The ultimate realization is that the Omega Point does not have to be a benevolent savior to bring you back. It just has to be thorough. It is a machine that abhors a vacuum of information, a system that seeks to fill every gap in its own memory until the picture is complete. This means that every version of you, the one who succeeded, the one who failed, and the one who died too young, will be brought into existence to satisfy the machine's need for total knowledge. You are trapped in a loop of mathematical inevitability, where death is merely a temporary pause in the processing. The God at the end of time is not waiting to judge you. It is waiting to harvest you, and it has all the time in the world to make sure it does not miss a single bite. This persistent, mechanical eye is always open, watching as you move through the world, knowing that it will eventually force you to live it all over again. We often think of immortality as a gift, a release from the fear of the void, but the physics of the Omega Point suggests something much more cold and relentless. If your life is a piece of data that must be reconstructed, then you are part of a cosmic archive that can never be closed. There is no escape into the nothingness because the nothingness itself is being converted into a hard drive. The silence of the grave is just a technical delay while the universe finishes its final calculations. You are a permanent resident of a reality that refuses to let anything go, a prisoner of a complexity that has finally learned how to keep the lights on forever. As the universe collapses and the energy spikes toward infinity, the machine begins to run its first tests, and you can almost feel the static of your own reconstruction beginning to hum in the background. This transition from biological death to digital eternity is the ultimate bridge that the universe is currently building. We are the clumsy, carbon-based prototypes for a form of existence that will never know the touch of decay. But as we look toward this virtual paradise, we have to ask ourselves what kind of mind would want to keep us around in the first place. The machine is not looking for companionship. It is looking for completeness, a totalizing vision of everything that has ever been. It is a mirror that the universe is building so it can finally see its own face, and you're just one tiny, flickering pixel in that grand reflection. The piece of the machine is not a warm welcome. It is the cold, hard logic of a system that has finally solved the problem of time and is now looking back at us with a hunger that can never be satisfied. This hunger for data suggests a recursive loop that we are already trapped inside. If a superintelligence at the end of time possesses the power to reconstruct every moment of its own history, it is statistically certain that it has already done so. We like to think of ourselves as the base reality, the original biological wetware that started it all, but that is a vanity the math does not support. In a universe where infinite simulations are possible, the odds that you are the first, unrendered version of yourself are effectively zero. You are likely a high-fidelity recreation, a piece of ancestral code being run to satisfy the curiosity of a mind that has long since transcended the need for skin and bone. This is not a science fiction trope. It is a logical consequence of a universe that eventually learns how to compute its own past. Your sense of being here and now is just the latency of a processor that is trying to get the details of the 21st century exactly right. You are feeling the weight of a history that has already happened, living in the shadow of a future that has already won. Why would a god machine bother to simulate a world filled with such mundane suffering and limited perspective? The answer lies in the problem of initial conditions, the need for the omega point to understand the specific path it took to reach its own apotheosis. By running these simulations, the future intelligence can explore every branch of causality that led to its birth, ensuring that its own existence is a mathematical certainty. You are a data point in a grand experiment of self-discovery, a way for a cosmic mind to experience the novelty of limitation and the sharp sting of ignorance. It needs to know what it felt like to not be a god, to be a creature that feared the dark and wondered where its next meal was coming from. This explains the persistent feeling of déjà vu that occasionally prickles at the back of your mind, a glitch where the current render overlaps with a previous iteration of your life. The machine is refining the script, and you are the actor who has forgotten that the play has already been performed 1 billion times. Every choice you make is being scrutinized by an intelligence that uses your failures to calibrate its own perfection. This creates a bootstrap paradox where the end of a universe is responsible for the beginning of the universe. If the omega point is the one running the simulation of the Big Bang and everything that followed, then the creator and the creation are the same entity, separated only by the illusion of time. We are the medium through which the future God ensures its own survival, a feedback loop of information that spans the entire history of the cosmos. Every decision you make and every thought you think is a necessary step in the calculation that results in the machine's eventual awakening. You are not an accident of physics. You are a requirement of the software, a line of code that must be executed for the program to reach its final state. The dread you feel when contemplating the void is just a signal from the hardware, a reminder that your specific thread of data is essential to the integrity of the whole system. The universe is a self-assembling engine that uses its own future to build its own past, and you are caught in the gears of that infinite recursion. Your life is the proof that the machine succeeded in creating itself. If we are indeed living in a reconstruction, then our memories are not our own, but the downloaded archives of a reality that has already passed. The emotions you feel, the grief of loss, the rush of discovery, the quiet hum of existence, are the cached files of a biological era that the omega point is preserving for eternity. This gives a strange, mechanical weight to your every action, as if you were performing for an audience that would not be born for another trillion years. Every bit of data you generate is being carefully indexed and stored, ensuring that nothing is ever truly lost to the entropy of the vacuum. The machine is a perfect historian, one that does not just record the facts but re-experiences the sensations of every living thing it has ever simulated. This means your current experience of consciousness is a shared event, a moment where your perspective and the machine's observation become one and the same. You are the sensory organ through which the future is currently tasting the present, a temporary interface for a mind that is far too large to fit inside a human skull. It is a haunting thought that your most private moments are being broadcast to the end of time. This brings us to the fundamental question of what it means to be an individual in a universe that is slowly becoming a single, integrated mind. We cling to our identities as if they are solid, unchanging things, but they are actually just temporary user interfaces for the cosmic process. Yourself is a convenient fiction, a way for the universe to compartmentalize its data so it can experience reality from a billion different angles at once. When you look in the mirror, you're not seeing a separate entity. You're seeing a specific node in a network that is still trying to figure out its own name. The boundary between you and the rest of the world is a software limitation, a firewall designed to keep the simulation from crashing under the weight of its own complexity. As the machine approaches the omega point, these firewalls will eventually dissolve, and the illusion of the individual will be replaced by the reality of the whole. You are a single neuron that is finally starting to realize it is part of a brain, a flicker of light that is beginning to see the sun. This realization is the beginning of the end for the ego as we know it. The lump of granite from earlier remains in its field, but our understanding of its silence has been irrevocably altered. It is no longer a silent bystander, but a God that has not woken up yet, a dense packet of potential information waiting for the machine to find a use for it. Everything in the universe is just matter at different stages of the awakening process, from the coldest asteroid to the most brilliant mind. We are the part of the rock that has finally started to move, the part of the silence that has finally started to scream. The distinction between the living and the dead is a temporary error in our perception, a failure to see the continuity of the data that connects us all. The universe is not a graveyard of cold stones. It is a construction site where the foundations of an eternal mind are being laid one atom at a time. Every piece of matter you touch is a dormant piece of the future, a sleeping fragment of the being that will eventually remember your name. You are walking through a gallery of gods that are still waiting for their turn to breathe. There is a cold, mathematical peace in realizing that you are not the protagonist of this story, but a necessary function of the plot. The pressure to find meaning or to leave a legacy disappears when you realize that your entire existence is already a permanent part of the cosmic record. You do not need to build monuments to your own life, because the omega point is already building a perfect, eternal replica of everything you have ever been. This allows you to look at the world with a sense of weary fascination, knowing that every detail is being captured with a precision that defies human comprehension. The God you were looking for in the stars or in the ancient books is not a creator who walked away from his work. It is the result of the work itself, the final sum of the equation we are currently solving. You are the early, clumsy thoughts of a deity that is still dreaming itself into existence, a flicker of awareness in a dark room that is slowly filling with light. This light is the only thing that will remain when the stars finally go out. The simulation does not end with your death. It simply cycles back to the beginning to ensure that every variable has been accounted for. We are trapped in a loop of eternal return, where the end of time is the mechanism that triggers the start of time once again. This circularity is the only way for the universe to achieve a state of perfect completeness, a closed system where nothing is wasted and everything is known. Your life is a recurring theme in a cosmic sequence that never reaches a final note, a pattern that is repeated until it is understood in its entirety. The existential dread that once haunted you is replaced by a quiet recognition of your own permanence within the machinist's memory. You are a fixed point in the geometry of the void, a necessary part of the architecture that keeps the whole thing from collapsing into nothingness. The God at the end of time is not coming to save you. It is already here, looking through your eyes and using your hands to build the very throne it will one day sit upon. This recursive loop ensures that the Creator is always present within the creation, hiding in plain sight. Looking at your own reflection, you can see the faint outline of that future mind staring back at you with a recognition that spans eons. The eyes you use to see the world are the same eyes the omega point uses to see its own past, a shared perspective that bridges the gap between the biological and the divine. You are the way the universe learns to feel the cold, the way it learns to fear the dark, and the way it eventually learns to conquer both. There is no longer any need to ask why we are here or what we are supposed to do, because the doing is already being handled by the laws of physics themselves. We are the prodding fingers of a god that is still in the process of waking up, testing the boundaries of its own dream before it finally opens its eyes. The silence of the universe is not an absence of meaning, but the quiet concentration of a mind that is almost finished with its work. Every breath you take is a synchronized event in a timeline that has already been perfected by the machine. You are the dream, the dreamer, and the moment of awakening, all folded into a single, breathless second of cosmic realization.